Ethan was driving home after a long shift when he noticed a woman standing beside a stalled sedan on a quiet roadside. Her hood was open, hazard lights blinking weakly. She looked frustrated and worried. Ethan slowed down, pulled safely onto the shoulder, and asked whether she needed help immediately. The woman introduced herself as Claire. She explained that her car had suddenly stopped after making a strange sound, and she had already tried calling roadside assistance. The estimated wait was nearly an hour. Ethan looked beneath the hood, checked several connections, and calmly began investigating the problem that morning. Claire watched from a safe distance while Ethan worked. He discovered that a loose battery connection had caused the problem. After tightening the terminal and checking the cables, he asked Claire to start the engine. The sedan roared back to life, and Claire's worried expression immediately changed into relief completely. Claire offered to pay him, but Ethan refused. He told her that anyone would hope for help in the same situation. She smiled and thanked him several times. Before leaving, she asked for his name and promised to remember his kindness. Ethan simply waved and continued toward home that evening. The next morning, Ethan had almost forgotten about the incident. He was drinking coffee at his kitchen table when someone knocked on his apartment door. Confused, he opened it and found Claire standing there with a small paper bag and an unexpectedly bright smile. She looked genuinely happy. Ethan stared at her in surprise. Claire explained that she had searched for him after remembering the neighborhood where he had stopped. She had brought breakfast as a thank you. Ethan laughed and told her she really hadn't needed to do that. Claire replied that gratitude mattered deeply to her. They talked for several minutes in the hallway. Claire revealed that she worked nearby and had been embarrassed about becoming stranded alone. Ethan reassured her that there was nothing embarrassing about needing assistance. Their conversation felt surprisingly easy, despite the fact that they had met only once before that day. Claire asked whether Ethan had plans for the weekend. He said he was probably going to repair a few things around his apartment. She smiled and mentioned that her own house needed several small repairs. Then she hesitated before asking whether he knew someone who could possibly help. Ethan understood the question immediately and offered to take a look. Claire thanked him and invited him over that afternoon. When he arrived, he discovered a loose cabinet, a broken porch light, and a stubborn garden gate. Claire apologized for the list, but Ethan laughed and started working without hesitation. By sunset, everything worked again. Claire prepared dinner as a thank you, and Ethan accepted reluctantly after she insisted. They sat at the kitchen table discussing ordinary things, favorite foods, childhood, memories, difficult jobs, and the strange ways people sometimes meet when life unexpectedly interrupts their plans together. Claire admitted she had been having a difficult year. She had recently moved after ending a long relationship and was still adjusting to living alone. Ethan listened without judging. He understood that fixing a broken car was easy compared with helping someone rebuild confidence after losing familiar pieces of life. Ethan shared some of his own struggles. He had spent years believing he needed to handle everything independently. Claire smiled and told him that accepting help was not weakness. Their conversation became deeper than either expected, but neither tried to force the evening into something it wasn't, and both understood why. Over the following weeks, Claire occasionally invited Ethan for coffee. Sometimes they talked for 10 minutes, sometimes for hours. Their friendship developed naturally. There were no dramatic promises or sudden declarations. They simply enjoyed each other's company and appreciated the unusual circumstances that had brought them together naturally over time. One Saturday, Claire's car stalled again, but this time Ethan was nowhere nearby. She called him anyway, expecting advice. Ethan drove over immediately. After checking the vehicle, he discovered a different issue and arranged for a professional mechanic to handle it. Claire appreciated that he knew when to ask for help. Later that evening, Claire confessed she had been nervous about calling him. She didn't want him thinking she only contacted him whenever something broke. Ethan smiled and told her he enjoyed seeing her regardless of whether anything needed fixing. Claire looked relieved, and the conversation suddenly became quieter than before. Neither spoke for several seconds. Ethan realized their friendship had become important to him. Claire seemed to realize the same thing. Still, they agreed that moving slowly was better than rushing into something simply because their first meeting had felt memorable. Respect mattered more than excitement, they both believed completely. Months passed, and their connection continued growing. They attended local events, shared meals, helped each other with small projects, and laughed about the roadside incident that had started everything. Claire eventually joked that her broken car had been the most expensive coincidence because it had introduced her to Ethan unexpectedly. Ethan laughed whenever she said that. He reminded her that he had only stopped because he happened to notice someone needing help. Claire replied that kindness rarely arrives with a schedule. Sometimes, she said, the smallest decision can quietly redirect an entire chapter of someone's life forever. One evening, they returned to the same roadside where they had first met. Claire wanted to see the place again, believing it represented an unexpected turning point. They stood beside her now perfectly reliable car, remembering how uncertain everything had felt that first night. Both smiled at the memory together. Claire finally took Ethan's hand and thanked him for stopping that day. Ethan squeezed her hand gently and said he was glad he had. What began with a stuck car became a friendship built on trust, patience, and kindness. Neither planned it, but both were grateful that they had stopped.